The chaos of humanity, the frenzy of being alive. Why is that a recurring trope in your movies?
We're living in a chaotic world.
Widely credited to be one of the major auteurs who pushed for experimental cinema in the contemporary Malayalam Cinema Industry, Lijo Jose Pellissery has revolutionized and redefined the ambitions of Mollywood. The direction of the popularly recognized master of chaos is often characterized as raw, desperate, and hilarious, but dismisses any attempt to be performative, even though his productions are introspective and self-reflective. He has developed his own distinct genre and expressionist style of filmmaking that tries to explore the grim and uncomfortable truths of the human psyche through absurdist humor set in environments that turn chaotic. However, his films are never set in chaotic circumstances. Rather, he brings out the chaos present in everyday life. He tames this uncontrolled chaos within the social strands of society and within human beings, weaponizing it to create his narrative. In this video, we will look at 3 of his recent films, Angamaly Diaries, YAU Jallikattu, to explore this idea of controlled chaos through tropes he repeatedly uses in his work. But before we start to analyze these tropes and stylistic trademarks in Pellissery's films, this is your spoiler alert. Post-2015, Pellissery's films have emphasized the environment and personified it into an entity that audiences see themselves as part of. Films like Angamaly Diaries, YAU Jallikattu take a considerable amount of time to establish the environment, beliefs, and traditions of society. They also establish the relationship dynamics between its members and provide a visceral tour of the geography of the area to immerse the audience. And then things kick into gear when nothing goes as planned and the audience takes part in the chaos. What makes Pellissery's films stand out is the simplicity of the stories and the complexity with which they are told. All 3 films have one thing in common: nothing goes quite as planned and devolves into violence and chaos. In Angamaly Diaries, when one group tries to sell pork for a cheaper price to reap profits, they are met with competition from a rival gang. Subsequently, we witness the 2 gangs coming to terms peacefully before unsatisfied members of a 3rd gang stir more violence during a church festival. In YAU, the casket in which the dead body of the father is to be carried away breaks down midway. The trumpet of one of the band musicians, hired to play angelic music during the service, is broken, and as he plays, we hear squeaky voices that sound hilarious, like something one hears at a stand-up show. Only here, it's at a funeral. The instruments brought for the safe passage of the dead to the other world all fail, and ultimately, so does the institution of God, as a priest-turned-detective prevents the body from being buried on church ground out of spite. In Jallikattu, a controlled buffalo slaughter that happens on an everyday basis does a complete 360, as a buffalo ends up committing manslaughter. In the ensuing mayhem, man turns against one another, as one of the chasers of the buffalo attacks the other due to a grudge from past events, and ultimately stabs him, thinning the line between man and animal. Pellissery's films often subvert the status quo. In Angamaly Diaries, we see teens dressed as Jesus, Mary, Joseph, and their followers, running amok in the town of Angamaly and getting into brawls in a bar. Their solution to all of their problems is violence, and they act without taking into consideration themselves or the people around them. In YAU, we see how a highly spiritual and holy event like a funeral is intervened by a priest trying to find the supposed killer of natural death and the second family of the dead person revealing themselves at the ceremony. The daughter of the dead man is also hinted to be pregnant out of an external affair. The supposed fiancé of the daughter comes to the household to share intimate moments with her, ignorant of the fact that her father died just a few hours ago. The holy and spiritual function of the funeral is thus stained with unholy acts of violence and adultery. In Jallikattu, we see similar paradoxes as self-proclaimed civilized men terrorize females in households by forcing themselves on them for temporary pleasure. We also see how greed takes over a whole village as men with sticks and spears pierce one another in order to get the meat of the buffalo. Lust and greed for meat takes over, resulting in cannibalism. Pellissery uses long tracking shots to show the real nature of man outside the temporary facades usually shown. The longer one is followed, the longer one's self can be brought out as they get more comfortable in an environment where they can be themselves. The long tracking shots make the audience witness the true identity of a person. One of the most memorable sequences of Angamaly Diaries is the last shot of the film, an 11-minute long tracking shot that covers the Angamaly Church Festival and the concluding violence that ensues, leading to the epilogue. YAU has repeated tracking shots from the interior of a household to follow characters and observe their absurd antics thereafter when a death happens in the family. Jallikattu also has long tracking shots employed mostly in the night as we follow villagers tracking down a wild beast and attempting to tame it. These dragged out shots through tall grass temporarily prevent vision, and audiences are forced to rely on sounds of breath to distinguish man and beast. Gradually, this distinction also fades away as the intensity of camera movement increases along with the crescendo of wild breaths. Another recurrent trope in Pellissery's work is the use of food and how it is shot. For him, meat acts as a symbol of man's primal desires. We see extensive shots of meat being prepared in the opening sequence of Angamaly Diaries, as well as pigs being slaughtered to be sold. In Jallikattu as well, we see buffaloes being slaughtered and meat being diced for sale. Meat embodies the carnal desire of man to want flesh, which also translates to the carnal desires of sex, which is distinctly referred to in all of these films. Subsequently, his male characters ooze toxic masculinity and wish to be revered by their counterparts. Pellissery takes great effort in attempting to convey to his audience, no matter how civilized we claim to be, or how far we have come as an organized society, the primal savages humans are will always remain, and under certain circumstances, these desires will take over. We see mindless violence in all three films, and how gossip easily floats around the air. We see how man jumps into action without any thought for himself, but because he sees his comrades jump into action. Man loses control of his body and submits to his savagery, letting a herd mentality take over. Respect for the dead, religion, and community are all disavowed as the person is present only in the moment and acts out of fluctuating emotions and desires. It's this savagery and chaos that Pellissery has tried to emulate in his work. He is an anarchist visionary, an auteur who shows the world he sees, unfiltered and unapologetic in his means of conveying the same.